Started. So thanks everyone that is attending virtually online. It's great to see you all, and I'm waving hello. So this is kickoff to our 2020-21 year, and it's the establishment grant. We've had this for quite a few years now. Not too many changes from last year. We'd like to keep some things stable this year. I'm Danny Robertson-Boersma, or Danielle, I'm trying to switch to Danny, and I'm the Funding Programs Officer here at SHRF, and I'll be the person that you'll be contacting if you have any questions during the application process for the establishment grant. So just a quick overview of what's happening. Also, I'll just go through, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. You can do that throughout the presentation. If I answer it right away, or I might be waiting because it might be coming up on a slide, or I might leave it till the end, but just throw it up there and I'll make sure to go through, try to answer everyone's questions. Yeah, so the agenda today is I'm going to give a quick overview of SHRF, just in case you don't know who we are. Then we're going to go into the program overview, so this funding opportunity. We'll talk briefly about what's new. As I said, we're keeping this one pretty stable, so nothing too crazy. We'll go through those important dates. Then we'll discuss the grant funding, eligibility for the principal applicant along with any other applicants, the application process, the review process, and finally tips and questions. This shouldn't take more than 30 to 45 minutes, so I will try to keep it short for you guys. So right now we are going through SHRF is going through a strategy refresh. So right now, as usual, but with a different wording, SHRF's investment is in research that will contribute to the improved health of Saskatchewan citizens through a high-performing health system with a robust culture of health research and innovation. We're doing this through three ways: by strengthening the research capacity and competitiveness here in the province, by increasing investment in research and innovation, and by aligning research with our stakeholder needs. And SHRF has many stakeholders, from the general public to we work with different funding and charities here in the province, with our institutions, those who have MOUs with us, government, they're a stakeholder. So there's a whole bunch that we try to align with. Along with that, SHRF also, we try to follow internally and externally. We have 5 values. We work towards accountability, adaptability, collaborations, excellence, and integrity. So whenever you're working with SHRF staff or when we're going through our programs and everything, we try to uphold these 5 values. At SHRF, we have this big scope of health research that we try to fund our applications through. We do this through biomedical, clinical, health systems and policy, and population health. And we try to do it from the basic to the applied. So that could be, maybe you're a basic biomedical researcher, maybe you're more on the basic side when it comes to clinical, or maybe you're transitioning or you've always done applied health research, whether that's in biomedical or health systems and policies. Our goal is trying to fund excellence, and we do that through an array of applications. So that was about SHRF, keep it short and simple. Getting to the purpose of the establishment grant, what it's to do is assist researchers who are new or newly resident in Saskatchewan in establishing an independent program of health research in the province and achieving the research productivity necessary for obtaining major funding from national and other external agencies. So if you're interested in this grant, you should be keywords you should be looking at in this funding purpose is, are you new or newly resident? We'll get into what that means. Are you working towards an independent program of health research? A big thing is we are the provincial funding agency, so you want to make sure that this is within the province. And is your goal in your research to go forward for major funding? So what's new? This year, like I said, trying to keep it simple, try to keep something stable right now. So the Eligibility Check Reviewer Access, we've heard from different applicants and reviewers. So going forward, the review committee will not be able to see your eligibility check. That is purely internal. It's to make sure that you are eligible for the application, so you don't go and write the entire application and then find out that you probably shouldn't have. It's just going to be one of our steps that we'll continue having, but we'll make sure that the reviewers will not be able to see it, because they wouldn't, in the past, they weren't using it as part of the review, but still now we've just gotten rid of it. No one can see it, but internal SHRF staff. Also, the eligibility check cutoff date change. Last year, it was just shortly before the full application. We have pushed it back, so it's going to be in the middle of January now. That is in the important dates, and we'll discuss that. And then we've also, on top of the eligibility check cutoff, there is now a revisions deadline, and I'll get into that. Finally, the formatting requirements, we've been working with those. Things have been going pretty well. One thing that we have updated though is the page size. There's been questions, so you do have to use an 8.5 by 11. That's your usual page size. And also now we've made it just going forward with fonts, you do need to use Calibri, Arial, or Times New Roman only, still in that black type. We've just found that we're still using a lot of different fonts, so we're just going to make that a rule now. So make sure that when you're working on all of those documents that it's within our formatting guidelines, which is in the application package on page 15. So important dates, we launched this last week. So you guys would have seen right now we only have the program guide component up. Tanya here at the office is working diligently with Smart Simple to get the application up for you guys on the RMS. And once that is ready and we've tested it, I'm hoping by the end of the week, but otherwise early next week. Thank you for your patience. Then you'll be able to see the application instructions. It'll be similar as in previous years. Again, we're trying to keep things easy for you guys. There just might be a couple small changes. So once you're able to get in there, you know that this is the webinar today, the eligibility check cutoff. So that's when you have to submit the check cutoff will be January 16th. We're always at 4:30 p.m. So I'm just going to say that any of our cutoff deadlines is always 4:30. Then what'll happen is I will review those eligibility checks throughout from now until January 16th, and I'll do reviews afterward, and we might have a back and forth discussion, but final revisions must be in by January 21st. Any other revisions submitted after that will not be eligible. So just keep that in mind. This is a process where we have a lot of back and forth together until a decision is made or until you've submitted your first check, which is the 16th, and then any final revisions by the 21st. The application deadline is March 12th. So make sure if you have any internal deadlines, you should probably write that deadline down and highlight it 3 times with an underline, and then just make sure that everyone knows that the application must be into SHRF by March 12th. Again, 4:30. We allow for this one CV updates. So if any kind of funding comes through, anything that you'd like to share with us that we would then share with the review committee, that has to be in by May 14th. In the application package, it does say the 16th. That is a Saturday. I won't be here. We'll make sure that's updated when we send forth the full guide. But just write down it's May 14th. Funding decisions will be out a little bit earlier than usual. They'll be out June 18th instead of the end of the month. And then the funding start dates will be July to October, the first of the month, as they always have been. And you can find this information on page 3 of the application package. So getting into the grant, so the value is that you can request up to $120,000 for a maximum of 3 years. Don't request more, we won't be able to fund it. And at the time of this program launch with our funding envelope, it looks like we'll be able to fund at least 10 grants, and that's all dependent on request dollars and everything like that. But we're looking at about a $1.2 million envelope for this guy. Something to keep in mind is the go-to guides. This information will help you when you're working on your application. So make sure you're looking at the most recent application package. We've recently rebranded it, so you'll see that it looks different. But as long as it says 2020-21, then you're looking at the right one. You'll also want to look at the most recent awards guide. That's up on our website in multiple areas. Here I wanted to highlight the resources page. You'll be able to find that under our funding header. This is where you're going to find the majority of this information. And the awards guide right now, the most recent is up. There may be an update, but that won't be until probably after your deadline. Then there's the SHRF's research management system, so our RMS, and we also have a researcher manual, so that'll give you screenshots and instructions on how to find things within your researcher portal on the RMS, how to log in, everything like that. We just recently updated that too, so it should be good to go for you. You'll be able to find that under resources. As you can see, we've highlighted shrf.ca/funding resources. That's a really important place where you can find all sorts of things you're going to need. And then we also have our opportunities page. As you know, right now, we just have the one opportunity. SHRF's funding team is currently working on a funding framework, and we are looking at what we'll be offering the research community in the upcoming year, so stay tuned for that. And also check out SHRF's YouTube channel. You can get there through our website. And here we have a lot of videos that we've worked on, how-tos, so it might be a bit faster than trying to flip through that manual, and then it just shows you how to log in, how to complete an application, everything like that. So at SHRF, if you are applying for our funding, especially with this establishment grant, you'll need to make sure that you are applying with an institution that has a memorandum of understanding with us, otherwise known as an MOU. Those with an MOU will then be able to work with you and make sure that you get the funds and everything. So as you can see, we're with 6. We recently updated the RQHR one, so now it's with the Saskatchewan Health Authority. As always, we also are with the University of Regina, Saskatchewan Polytechnic. St. Thomas More also has their own MOU, if you weren't aware, and then Parkland College as well. So make sure that when you are applying, that you are working with one of these institutions and that you are eligible to work with one of these institutions. Getting into the meat of this, so the principal applicant, this is a grant where you are working to start your program of research. You're early on in your career or you're new to Saskatchewan. So there's only one application per principal applicant, and you have to clearly demonstrate that you are the principal applicant. We do know a lot of research happens with everyone that supports you, and we do have a lot of teams going on, but the focus of this grant is that this is for you to create your independent research program. So keep that in mind. You must be an independent researcher. We have a further definition as to what this is under our definitions, what we mean by being an independent researcher here at SHRF, and you'll be able to find the definitions on page 12 of the application package. You have to hold or have a commitment to hold a position at the institution with the MOU, and it must be at minimum at the assistant professor, and adjunct positions do not count for this grant. You'll also need to have held this position in Saskatchewan for no more than 3 years as of July 1st in the application year. So then you just go back 3 years from July 1st of 2020. So you're looking at about 2017. And then we can always discuss if there was any interruptions during your time, if that would count towards adding a bit more time for you. Simultaneously, you cannot be a graduate student, a research fellow, or hold any other training award or be employed by a for-profit business related to the proposed research. That's pretty self-explanatory. Then you're no longer independent, and then you can no longer hold this. And you mustn't be a principal applicant on any previous establishment grants. So only one establishment grant. Something that we've been working here at SHRF too is talking more about who else is on these kind of grants. So these are application role considerations. So when we discuss an applicant, so that would be a co-applicant that would be on your grant, they're individuals who contribute to the intellectual or scientific direction of the proposed work. So they'll share in the responsibilities for the direction of those proposed activities. Things that would need to be considered if you want them to be an applicant on your grant. They are added to the application as a co-applicant. You can give them edit or read-only status, and you'll do that using the adding contacts menu bar in the RMS. What they'll need to do is accept the invitation to the application, and then that lets you know as the principal applicant that they've given consent on the grant. That's the reason why we don't have you running around looking for all those signatures anymore. You only need to sign it, and your institution needs to sign it, no one else. Make sure that they're discussed in the role in proposed research attachment. Some of you maybe know that as the team attachment, but now because this is more of an independent, it's just the role in proposed research. They'll need to provide information about their expertise. That could be the CCV, It may be our modified CV. It might be a patient testimonial. You'll see in the co-applicant definitions the specific format type that they should be giving you, and they're not compensated from the grant except for patient honoraria. A good example of this is if you have a research fellow that's going to be working with you, they'll need to decide if they want to be an applicant where they won't be paid out of this grant, or if they'll be personnel where they will not be on the grant, but they will get paid out of it. Another type of application role to consider is collaborators. They're individuals or organizations who provide a specific service in a limited or defined role within the proposed activities, or they may just have general interest in the research outcomes. So they're not added to the application. You don't have to invite them to be on your application, but they can be discussed in the role in the proposed research attachment. You can discuss what they may be giving to support you in the grant or why they're interested in those outcomes. They do have the possibility to be compensated from the funds. We do understand that sometimes people need to get paid. So just talk to me about that and I'll give you a heads up if that's okay or not. And then they must provide a letter of support, identifying the specific supports or their interest in the research outcomes. So there's no CVs for your collaborators or anything like that, but make sure your letter of support is updated and it's addressed to you as the principal applicant. You don't want to use an old letter. Reviewers do catch on that, and then they sometimes aren't always the most impressed because you didn't go to check up and get a new letter. Finally, there's the personnel. There's the trainee and research staff. These are the individuals that help you out, make sure that some of that work is getting done. They're usually tasked to carry out aspects of the research project, and they are compensated from grant funds. So they're not added to the application. They are discussed in the role and proposed research attachment. So if you do have someone already in mind or hired to the grant, you can discuss who they are and what they'll be doing. They won't provide any information for the application about their expertise, so there's no CVs, no resumes, or anything like that. And they can be compensated from the grant because they haven't been added. Another important thing that you should probably start working on sooner than later is getting a letter of support. This is jointly signed by the department head or the dean or their delegates, agreeing to the proposed activities in the application. So there's a couple of things that letter should have in it. It needs to discuss the research environment, including any supports, and those supports can be equipment, your mentorship, do you have space to do your research? Is there any teaching reductions, anything like that the reviewers would need to know? The support for proposed activities in the application and confirmation of sufficient protected research time to complete proposed activities. SHRF doesn't have a specific percentage that you need to have for protected research time, but you need to make sure that what you're writing and proposing to do for your research activities will be feasible and works with your protected research time to do that. In the letter of support, they'll need to know the nature and extent, so hours and days of non-research activities. So if you are teaching, they'll need to know how much and when, if there's any clinical duties you have, and any admin duties. It should also indicate if the applicant is not in an appointment at the time of application to provide the start date confirmation effective by October 1st of application year. So if you are not starting your position yet, and it won't be happening until September, just make sure that is confirmed in this letter. And then information regarding term positions and process to permanent. We do know that there is a term position, and sometimes that term position may end right now before you would be done your research project. So that's where that letter would say what the plan is so that you can continue to do your work, and maybe the process that's happening to get you into a permanent position at the end of your term. Again, we can discuss this and what that looks like and what we would need from you as the principal applicant. Going into allowable expenses, so include only the expenses that are allowed and necessary for the proposed research and are not provided through other means. Only fund the research and the closely related components of the project. We at SHRF do not pay for overhead, administration of research funding, or fund healthcare service programs. So that goes back to the fact that we only fund the expenses that are necessary and allowed and that relate closely to the components of your project. In-kind and collaborations are encouraged when appropriate. So if this is where a good idea would be if you have a collaborator who has the specific equipment, make sure you have that collaboration letter. But also then in the in-kind table, you can put down how much that equipment would usually cost. That won't affect the amount requested, but it's good to show that you have been doing the work in the collaborations. The reviewers, again, they like to see that you're already starting to integrate with your research community and everything, and we're able to see equipment being used and you don't have to ask for it through your grant. Limit the research dissemination costs. We have $7,500 over 3 years for your end of grant KT. That includes conferences, travel, everything like that. So make sure that you don't go over that $7,500. This limit does not include integrated KT. We do understand that sometimes KT happens throughout your research project. It's more so that end of grant when it comes to conferences, publications, things like that. And then make sure that you follow institution guidelines and rates related to services, travel costs, and personnel support. Your institution is a great resource. Make sure that you've connected with them and asked them about any of these questions, like how much should you pay a third-year undergraduate student versus a master's student? Things like that, they'll be able to tell you. Here at SHRF, we don't know how much, so I wouldn't be any help for you there. So just getting into the application process. As I said earlier, we have an eligibility check. The purpose for this, we introduced it, I think, almost 2 years ago now. It's to identify the relevance to funding opportunity, purpose, and objective. So we're making sure, are you applying to the right grant? Because there's very specific eligibility requirements for the principal applicant, we check that so that you don't do all of the work and then find out you aren't even eligible. What this also does internally is it helps me facilitate the creation of the review committee. I start to get an idea of who's applying and what kind of expertise we're going to need on the committee. It also informs partners of interest where applicable. So this year we don't have any funding partners on, but we do always talk to the different charities. We work with different groups. So if a specific application comes up that may be of interest to one of our previous funding partners, we might bring that forward so that we can then expand the envelope so that more grants can get funded. And then it's to formalize the eligibility process. It gives feedback. What'll happen too is if there's any special circumstances about your eligibility, I will then write up a note that goes on your application right at the front, and then the reviewers see that. So when they're reviewing, there's no questions in their mind prior to the meeting. It's right in front. They know that you're eligible to be applying for this grant. So the process is, it's reviewed internally by the SHRF program manager. So that's myself. I'll be looking at your eligibility. And all I'm doing is reviewing the eligibility. I'm not reviewing your content. I'm not identifying if they're good methodologies or anything like that. That's for your peers, not for me. It's a rolling intake and approval process. So once the RMS is open, hopefully say next week, you could go in, you could put in your eligibility information and you could submit it by the end of the week. And then I'll try to get that back to you within 3 to 5 business days. It'll probably be a little bit slower over the Christmas holidays. But then by doing that, if everything looks good, I'll send you straight to full application. So then you could actually start working on your full application in January instead of waiting until that cutoff date on the 16th. But you do have until the 16th to submit your initial eligibility check. And then from there, as I said, it's a rolling intake and approval process, but final revisions the final revisions and decisions will happen on January 21st. After that, eligibility is done, no more discussion, we're moving on. So then there's the application process. So once you've made it through eligibility, you'll be able to get into the full application. Again, we'll have the instructions and the application online form ready for you, hopefully by end of week, if not early next week. Along with that, something to keep in mind is the review criteria. So when you're writing for this, these are kind of like the high levels, but then we have different points underneath, and you can find all of this information also in the application package. It's on page 9 to 10. So what the reviewers are looking for is the track record. So this is going to be 45% of their review. They're looking at your productivity, the originality, and your impact. The biggest thing to make sure of is, because we do understand, and so does the review committee, that you're early on in your career, and or even if you are from out of province and you're coming in, they want to see an upwards trajectory. They don't want to see that you've kind of flatlined at some point. They want to see that you're working towards getting more funding, that you're working towards your publication and your research. That's kind of where they look at. So, and it's that idea that you're building a reputation for excellence in their field. And that they demonstrate a promise for future health research provincially. We do say nationally because research does not stay within the boundaries of our province, but do keep in mind that when you're writing your application, it should focus on the provincial issues and really highlight how this will help Saskatchewan. The next component is that program of research, so that's 40%. So you should be demonstrating the integration of one or more projects within the overall proposed program of research that should be feasible within the proposed timeline. So if you are going to do the full 3 years, talk about how those projects, what you're going to do, and how it's going to work. And then finally is the impact. So the applicant should address the potential impacts of the proposed program of research, and you should be addressing the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences impact categories. You can find this information under that resources page, but just briefly, we're looking at impacts regarding capacity building, advancing knowledge, informing decision-making, and within the broad health, social, or economic impacts. So that's just a high level of the review criteria. As I said, there's points underneath that in the application package, and we'll also be putting up, reviewers get an in-depth evaluation criteria booklet. So it's about, I think, 10 to 12 pages, and it shows you exactly within our scale, this is what a 4.5 to a 4.9 should look like. It should be outstanding within these areas, everything like that. So that might be something, we'll hopefully get that up in the next week, but something that you should also take a look at because this is what the reviewers will be using. So that's kind of just an overview of what's in the application package. I want to give you guys a couple tips. I've been running this grant now, I think, for 4 years, so I've been sitting in on the peer review process. So really this, when I give you these tips, it's coming from what that looks like from helping applicants in the past couple of years. Really make sure you read that application package, know it front to back. I know that you guys have really read it. If you maybe find that I missed something and there's a mistake, that's good. That's good on you, not on me. But yeah, make sure you know that application package, you know the requirements that you have to fulfill for this grant. Next thing is grab the reviewer's interest. Get them excited. I know you've probably heard that multiple times, but if you can get them within that first paragraph or two, they're going to be excited to read it, and they're going to, it's interesting to see how reviewers work, but they'll make sure that they give the time and attention to all applications. But when you're excited to read something, that's a good thing. Make your case, so argue why it's important. If you're looking at something that maybe not a lot of people know about, sometimes they'll be like, well, why is this important to Saskatchewan? So throughout your application, make sure that you're identifying why it's important, not just to you and your career, but also to the province and the health of the people in the province. Make sure you're detailing the how, so how you're going to do it, who's going to help you. As I said, if you have some personnel in line already, that doesn't hurt you. Not having them isn't a bad thing either. That doesn't put a lot of weight on the review committee, but it's just good to say, like, I'm going to have that postdoctoral fellow help me out here, or I have a mentor in place who's going to help me with the statistical side of things because I'm not as strong in this area, but I am strong in others. The biggest thing is just don't let the reviewers have questions in the end, because then they'll try to fill it with answers. So address the potential bumps in the road. Again, these are your peers. They've gone through this. They know that research doesn't always work and it doesn't happen how you want it to. So they always appreciate when you've identified, like, this is what I plan to do, and the hope is it's going to work out, but if it doesn't, here's how I will work with plan A, B, C, and D. They like to see that, and it's really important to have that in there and make it clear. Make it easy to read. I do know that sometimes you're always going to use the wording and you need to be specific, but at times if you can still make it easy so that someone who's a biomedical researcher can understand what you're trying to do at a socio-health level, or vice versa, have someone else outside of your main research area read it, and if they can get the gist of your proposal, that's a good sign. We do here at SHRF make sure that we try to get reviewer expertise to match the applications, but depending on how many applications we get, this is still a multidisciplinary, so we can't get two specific reviewers for each applicant. It's not feasible. So just make it easy to read. Formatting is important. Now that's why we've kind of updated our formatting rules, but reviewers don't like to see a messy grant. It's not great to read, it's not easy, and then they're distracted by it. So they're gonna miss your case, they're gonna miss the hows. So just don't make it difficult, don't make it hard to read. Check your math. Another thing to keep in mind is, and it's hard when you're trying to do your budget justification, your budget table, and your proposal, but again, you don't want the reviewers to get stuck on math issues. So just double check it, have someone else do your math, and then it's out of the way, and they don't have to worry about, are you asking for $20,000 in mice, or was that supposed to be $2,000? Things like that. And then, like I said, field test your application, have someone else just take a read at something. Maybe your methods, you might think it's too in-depth or something like that. Have someone else check it out, and then they can tell you that they understood what you were saying, or, you know, this bit wasn't unclear. What did you mean here? This is all in an ideal world that you get everything done really early, but the more you can do before the deadline, the better. And then finally, go back to the application package and just double check, did you hit all the marks? Did you check your eligibility? Making sure that that review criteria is out so that you know your application fits within what the reviewers will be looking for. Those are some major tips that I've seen over the years, but I'm always happy to answer any questions you have. That's it. So did that within 30 minutes. If you guys at any point in time need to contact me, email is great. I try to be by my phone. If I'm not, just leave a message and I will get back to you within 24 hours. Another person to talk to once the RMS is up and ready to go. If you have any specific questions with that, Tanya is a great help. Her and I share an office, so I might even just sometimes talk to her, and we'll be able to answer it if you do call me, but she is a good resource, so make sure you have her email and phone on speed dial. And then, like I said, also check out our YouTube page. We have some of those how-tos, and also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Nikki, our communications officer, is really good at making sure that you guys are aware of what's going on at SHRF. Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I'll give you an update on is our Director of Funding Programs is out and about right now. She should have arrived in Regina hopefully now. And she'll be doing kind of a listening session this afternoon. So check out our website to see where she's going to be at. And then you could tell her if you have any questions about our general funding programs. As some of you know, we are going through a bit of a change at SHRF, and we're currently looking at our funding programs. So it'd be great to talk to her then. And anyone in Saskatoon, there will be a session next week. So just keep an eye out on our website for that information, or you can contact communications@shrf.ca for more information. So yeah, that's it for me. If you have questions, please use the Q&A. I'll stay on for about a couple minutes, and if I don't see anything, we'll sign off. Thanks, Alessia. All right, no questions. Oh, can we include collaborators who are past recipients of SHRF? Yeah, you can have co-applicants or collaborators. Just really think about those considerations of what you would want them to do on your grant, and just keep in mind that this is about you. But it's actually not a bad idea to have a previous SHRF establishment grantee who would be able to mentor you and help you out. Again, committee members like to see when you have a mentor. I hope that answers your question. All right, and with that, no other questions. We are going to sign off, and we'll let you know when we're going to have the RMS up ready and go so you guys can get started. Thanks again. Bye.